So today is October 4th, 2022. Time flies when you're having fun. Today's training, we're going to talk, this is a big one, so everyone be prepared. We're going to talk about dealing and working with sellers. So I'll give you a little bit of my insight, some of the things that I've seen over the years when I was working a lot with sellers, and then some of the stuff that I've learned over the years as a managing broker, designated broker, some of the complaints as they come to me, some of their fears or trepidations, things that might concern a seller moving forward, especially. So right now, it's a little bit different market. So dealing with sellers is going to be very important, and how we deal with sellers is going to be delicate. Okay. So it looks like everyone is on this sucker that's going to be on it. Pretty casual format. It's just you guys and me. If you have questions, go ahead and let me know. I don't see the chat as much. I have to kind of get onto it. So as I take breaks, I'll get into the chat and look at your questions if you have them. You're all muted right now. At least you should be. Dun, dun, dun. Check that. Everyone is muted. So that's good. You don't have to be. If you want to unmute yourself and just say, hey, Joe, I got a question, and dang it, you're going to answer it right now. That's fine. I do not have sensitive feelings. I do not cower or fade off like a snowflake. If you've got a hard question for me, I have got a hard answer for you. Good. My nose is itchy, so you're going to get some of this. I got to trim my mustache fur. And then, of course, green tea, Modus Mortgage. Water. Okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. Okay, so working with sellers. Working with sellers is one of the more delicate things you're going to do, especially over the next year, 15 months. I really believe as we enter into this downturn in 2023, it's not going to be drastic. We're not going to go off a cliff. It's just going to be kind of steady as she goes. So you're not going to see price appreciation. That's not going to happen. I mean, it might happen on a house. If someone got a really good deal on a house, they're in a great neighborhood, they made some improvements, it's just the right house. I mean, you're going to have those outliers. But so when I talk about these generalities, they are pretty much for the whole market, for the entire nation. And for the entire nation, we're going to see very little appreciation, if any. And we're going to see some trepidation by the sellers. Now, the buyers have their own trepidation because they've got high interest rates, better inventory, they've got all sorts of positives, but the high prices and the high interest rates are going to keep buyers kind of at the sideline. So, but sellers, what do we do with sellers? Now, I don't want to get into how you got a seller. That's up to you. We do talk about marketing. I think in 2 or 3 weeks, I'll do a real estate marketing class. But let's say at this point you have a seller. What do you do? Okay, great. Congratulations. You've got a listing. Conceivably, now we got to put that concept into motion. We have to take some action. So number one, you got to have a listing agreement. I don't care what state you're in, you have to have a listing agreement. You have to have a written document that says, I am authorized to list this house and market this house for the seller. So that's number one. Number two, you've got to have a lead-based paint form if it's older than 1958. You guys all remember that from your training when you got licensed. I mean, it's very common. It's federal law, so it applies to every state. If a house is older than 1958, you need to have a lead-based paint disclosure. So that you can advise people that there is no lead-based paint. When this first came out in basically the 80s, it was a big deal because there were a lot of houses with lead-based paint. For the most part, at this point, we're 50 years almost past this lead-based paint issue, and so it's rare to see it. Nobody manufactures it. You can't go to Home Depot and go to the lead-based paint section. So it's very rare to find it, but still it's federal law, so you have to disclose it. In most states, you also have to do a seller or property disclosure. So if you're going to do a listing, you've got to get that property disclosure. Alabamans that are on this call, you don't. They're a caveat emptor state, so they do not have to have a seller disclosure. It's a buyer beware, caveat emptor, if you don't know what that means. just fancy Latin for buyer beware. So it's really important to have that property disclosure, that seller disclosure. They're disclosing whether or not there was a crack in the foundation. I do this because this is them writing on the form. You do not want to fill out that form for them, okay? Do not, never, ever fill out a property disclosure form for the seller. That is a legal recipe that'll turn into disaster, because the lawyer's just going to come back and say, oh, my client, they knew that there was a crack in the foundation. It was the agent that filled that out for us. They never asked us. And even if they did, remember, if nothing's in writing, hearsay gets tossed. So you've got to have stuff in writing. Have them fill out the disclosure. It's, a crack in the foundation. We fixed it. There was a leak in the roof 20 years ago. We fixed it. It's fine. Over disclose. Always tell your client, your seller, to over disclose on these. They've got to be very honest, brutally honest, because what they're doing is saying, okay, up front, I'm telling you so that there's no problem later on, so that you don't come back to me and say, okay, there was a problem, you didn't disclose it, and we're suing you. Now, for those of you new to the industry, and most of you are newer, I know some of you have been in the industry for a while. If you haven't sat in my chair for the last 20 years, it's hard to understand what kind of lawsuits come at you. I promise you they come fast and furious sometimes. And I have to manage them very carefully. We had an agent that sold a house, left the industry completely. 3 years later, the buyer sued us because they had filled out part of the disclosure and they did not disclose. They did it with the seller. They were dual agent. They did it with the seller and they didn't disclose that there was a pest infestation. Turns out there were termites and the entire house had to be torn down and redone. It was a bad termite infestation. So that does happen. Mold is a big issue. I mean, there's so many things that are issues. Just tell your sellers to fill out that form and be brutally honest when they do it. Okay. And you don't have to beat them up on it. Just tell them what could happen to them. They could be sued if they don't fill it out honestly. Simple as that. Okay. There are foreign, like in Washington State, there's a FERPTA form. It's a federal disclosure basically saying that you are or are not a foreign-born person for tax purposes. So if you are foreign-born for tax purposes, they're going to get their tax on that house when it closes. So stuff like that they can fill out. There's a bunch of other forms you can fill out, but the most important one is that seller disclosure. Oh, and when you've got that listing agreement, then you're going to immediately order preliminary title report. And you can just call up the title company. You can say, hey, First American, Chicago Title, Tycor, whomever you want to use. I mean, that's all that kind of relationship building in this industry. And just call them up and say, I want to order a prelim title. Okay, they'll know what that means. And if you've never done one, it's really easy. If you have any questions, of course, you can contact us here at the headquarters and we'll help you with it. But you're basically just getting that Exhibit A. That Exhibit A is the legal description to the property. Okay, so that is what's recorded at the county assessor's office. They're the keepers of property information. So you can go to your county assessor, whatever county you're in, you should probably go to that website just to get familiar with it, the county assessor's website. So there you've got it. You've got Exhibit A, you've got property disclosure, you've got lead-based paint, FERPTA if needed, and you've got your listing agreement. So you've got those essential ingredients to basically legally do the listing. Okay, any questions on that? Chat? No, okay.
Yes, I have a question. So
talk to me, sister.
I was just writing that question, but I'll delete that. So is the FERPTA tax a percentage of the sale or a percentage of the price of the house?
It's a percentage of the profit.
Of the profit. Okay.
So if you buy it for $200,000 and you sell it for $300,000, you are taxed on the $100,000 difference.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the net proceeds.
All right.
I do this because it comes back to you. The net proceeds that come back to you.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Griselda. Okay. So we've got these forms. They're all filled out. They're signed. Fantastic. We're ready to go. We can list this property. But for me, the fastest I ever listed a property was probably a day, 24 hours, but oof, nip tuck there. That's a little too fast. I would give yourself at least 3 days, sometimes even a week. I typically will list a house on a Thursday. It depends. I mean, always ask the seller. Just you're in constant communication with the seller. And I don't care what happens or transpires during that listing. If a week has gone by and you have not communicated with the seller, you've got a problem. Always make sure that you are communicating with the seller. Even if you just call them up and say, oh, nothing's happening right now. We didn't have any showings this week. Obviously, that's a problem, and you probably should be talking to them about that, but we'll get into that later. But communicate with your seller. It's really important. So in this initial part of the listing, you really want to over communicate. If you call them every day, great. If you call them twice a day, fine. The worst that happens is they're like, hey, thanks for calling. No big deal. I'll take care of that. So now you've got to arrange a few things. So you've got the listing, you've got the paperwork. Now you've got to arrange a few things like photography. Are you going to have it professionally done, or are you going to have it done? Make sure you communicate that with the seller. Are you going to do a drone shot? Are you going to have the whirlybirds head up on 300 feet above the property and start taking all those pictures? Now that's great. We've all seen that, but that's also expensive. So that adds $200 or so to the photography. I've had photography bills that approach $1,000. So just be aware of that. Very nice properties. Obviously, I think typically you're going to be in the $400 range, might be $300, might be $500. It depends on what you're adding on to it. So just make sure that you talk to the seller about what's going into that. And you can even ask them about who's going to pay for it. I always pay for it up front, but I tell them, look, I'm going to earn this big commission from you. I appreciate your business. I'm going to pay for this photography. It's very expensive. Sometimes people have contracts that if you cancel this contract, this listing agreement, you'll reimburse me for my expenses. That can be done as well. In an even market, that's fine. Most people didn't do that in this really crazy market where everyone's trying to get a listing. Listing was going to sell in one day. That market has changed. Now, I will keep touching on changes because the market has changed so dramatically that we need to constantly be aware of it. But I talk to my sellers a lot, and it's like, okay, look, if I'm going to spend $1,000, oh, you want the drone shot? Fantastic. Oh, you want, the little orb camera that they stick in room by room by room? I forget the name of it, but it's a 360-degree view of the room and up, down, the whole thing. It's kind of like a Google Earth camera that they put on the cars. And so that's pretty cool, but that's expensive. So if you invest all this money into this listing, are you going to get that money back? Are you going to stage the house? Is it ready to go with the current furniture? Are they living in the house? Did they move already? So these things have to be all factored in. And if ultimately you're spending $1,500 up front to help list this house, are you going to get that money back? So you do have to have that discussion. And I know it's kind of painful. It depends on who the seller is. The seller might have been like, well, I chose between 3 firms and I chose you, but you better not ask me for anything. I mean, you get a bunch of jerks out there. It's real estate. There's a lot of jerks. But you do have to have that conversation to kind of know what's going to happen if this listing doesn't sell. And that's going to happen more and more. You're going to see listings not sell because sellers are setting the price up here, and the reality is the price should be down here. That's going to be 2023. It's going to be happening all year long. We're going to watch sellers kind of have to bring those prices down and down and down. So the starting point is really important. But so you want to figure out, okay, how am I going to do the photography? I've got to get a sign order. Now you can put up a signpost. You can do the little lawn things that you pop in there into the lawn. You can hire a professional signpost installation company. If you don't know who that is, new to the industry, you can Google, let's say you live in Kirkland, Washington, Kirkland signpost installation. You live in Tigard, Oregon, Tigard signpost, real estate signpost installations. So you can figure it out. There's a bunch out there. They usually charge $35, $40, maybe $50, depending on the riders and stuff that they put on or how far they have to drive out. But I use different signpost installation companies in different cities. And then they just put up the sign and the signpost. They might not have a sign, so you might have to put the actual sign up yourself, or they might have an inventory for you. You might have mailed them the sign, and they've got it in their inventory. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but again, you've got to talk to them. You've got to prepare. How am I going to get a sign up? And where's that sign going to be placed? Is it going to be placed in the front of the house? Is it going to be placed on the side of the house? Maybe both. It might be a corner lot, and you put one on the front and one on the side. So seen a lot of corner lot properties. That happens. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. But again, over communicate with everybody rather than under communicate. Those first few days of a listing are pretty wild. Okay, and that's Griselda. You're saying thank you. Okay. We like thank yous. Okay, so the signpost, that's really important. Lockbox, how are other agents going to access that house? What time of the day are they going to access that house? What does the seller want to do? I mean, I've had sellers that are, they work at night. And so they're sleeping during the day and they're like, look, nobody can come in this house from, 7 a.m. until 4 p.m. It's like, oh, okay. And then from 4 p.m., I'm gone. Or, if they want to come in at 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., I'm gone. So we'll leave it open. Most lock boxes have a timing mechanism on them. So you can only access them from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., maybe 9 p.m. It depends on the city, but you can adjust that as well. So you're going to want to get a lockbox and figure out what time is going to be appropriate. Most people are cool during the day. They're at work. You can set appointments. They might be like appointment only. Most vacant houses are just vacant. I actually get kind of annoyed when people call me if I have a vacant house listing and they call me and they're like, hey, is it a good time to show that tomorrow at 3 o'clock? I'm like, you knucklehead. Didn't you look at the listing? It's vacant. Like, just go show it. I put in there, show at any time on the listing, and then they still call. So I'd never say knucklehead. I only use that for my boys. So yeah, it's just everything is different. Whether or not they want to show it in the evenings, they might be hardcore about dinner time and like, nope, I'm not going to show it in the evening. I've even seen people that don't want to show it at night, or I'm sorry, on the weekends. So can you imagine that? Like trying to sell a house and then not showing it on the weekends? That makes it really, really hard. So they might say, let's show it on Saturdays, but don't show it on Sundays. I'll be at church and I'm not, it depends on what the religion is. And you just have to ask, when do you want this thing to show? Then you're going to need a key. Now, do you have a key to the house? Does that one key work for the garage? Does it work for, an extra room that's got a lock on it? Does that one key work? Or do I need a key for the front door, a key for the back door, a key for the garage? Do you need 3 sets of keys or 3 keys in one set? You're going to have to ask them, how are people going to access this property? And then get those keys. You might have to go make copies. I've done that before. I'm like, okay, you don't have a bunch of extra sets here. Why don't you go ahead and just give me your keys? I'm going to run up to Ace Hardware. I'm going to get a set made, and then I'll come back and give you your keys. So you've got lock boxes. You've got keys. Where are you going to put the lock box? Are you going to put it on the front door? Are you going to put it on a gas meter? Are you going to put it on a back door? And don't assume anything. One of the keys with sellers is do not assume anything. It'll set them off and they'll be really mad. So you want to talk through all of this that first day or so, especially when you're getting the listing paperwork done. Just be like, look, let's get our green tea and let's sit down and let's have a long discussion about how we're going to do this. And then see if anything comes up that might be a red flag or some bit of the listing that you're going to have to adjust. Okay, so all that stuff is scheduled. It's all being installed. It's being installed on a Thursday maybe. I like to start listings on a Thursday because it gives people a chance to peruse them, maybe even Wednesday. Thursday, Friday to peruse them, schedule showings for Saturday, Sunday, stuff like that. So I typically will not put something on the house. I'll put something on the house. I can't talk. Excuse me. Put the house on the market on a Monday, a Tuesday, or a Wednesday. It's typically Thursday and Friday to get people ready for the weekend. I do a sign and a name writer. You can have a 36-inch sign that you can design yourself. We have stuff you can order in our online store. You can do a lot of things. creatively if you want. I understand marketing and how it's nice to have our own brand, but just make sure you follow the guidelines of the state you're operating in. They all have them. Typically, Kelly Wright's got to be on there unless you're registered as a DBA. Then you don't have to have that happen, but most states require that. So if you have any questions, bring them to me or to Lisa or Matt or Kendra, anyone on the team, and say, okay, I want to do my own design. What do I need to do? We can get you the files, whether it's an AI file or a JPEG or a GIF or a BIF or a GIF or whatever else is out there. See, I'm showing my age. Obviously, I am not as technology advanced as I would like to be, but hey, at this point in life, what am I going to do? So, you want to make sure that you've got your sign up and that you've got your marketing. What are you going to do about flyers? You can go through different companies that do that. I know Zip Your Flyer sounds funny. It is funny, but it's a nationwide flyer distribution company. So you can take your market. It could be Portland, it could be Boise, it could be Kalispell, Montana, and then you can create your flyer and then send it out just to that geo-fenced area. So it goes out to all the agents in that area. They have a database of all the agents. So, and then they can send you a copy, or they can print them for you or send them to you. So there's a lot of different things you can do. There's different services out there that do it. I create my own in Publisher, just download some pictures and pop those in there. I think we might have some on the store, some templates that you can use. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I know the KV Core, you can do it. I know in Tour Factory, you can do it. So if you want to create flyers, there's a lot of different methods to creating a flyer. Basically, it's just the property description or the agent, not the agent remarks, the public remarks in the MLS. And I just cut and paste that onto a PDF or into whatever document I'm doing, download some pictures, move things around, logos, name, colors, pictures. I mean, it all works out just fine. So I can create a flyer typically in about a half an hour. And if you order a signpost, make sure that you order the flyer box if you're going to do flyers. Okay, let me check questions here. Oh, we're cruising along. You guys are awesome. Okay, so listing goes live. It goes live on a Thursday. What are you going to do that weekend? Are you going to hold an open house? Now, there's a little secret, a little dirty secret in the industry is open houses don't work for the most part. I shouldn't say that. Most of the time they don't work. Most of the time they are for the seller who is asking you to hold open houses in order to attract buyers. And that was fine in the 1990s, in the 2000s even. It was great. You'd meet people, all sorts of stuff. Now there's so much technology. Websites are so good at pictures. I mean, really thorough pictures. So you can have 60, 70 pictures. You can have these videos. You can have the drone shots. You can have the little round ball camera shots all over every room. I mean, you can do incredible things with technology, which means people don't have to go to open houses to get into the house. So a lot of times, and especially after COVID, so with that, technology was changing before COVID, and now after COVID, people are like, well, I'm not going into a house. I just got used to not going into houses for 2 years, until they're ready to buy. When they're ready to buy, they'll call you, the listing agent, say, I want to get into that house, which of course you're going to say, yay, let's do that. Or they're going to have an agent and they're going to schedule a time to get into the house, and then they'll confirm what they've seen in the pictures and go, yep, this is the house we want. Let's make an offer. But open houses they just are what they are. There's people who sold houses in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. They're like, look, my old agent, they did lots of open houses. So you might have to do that. Bring a good book. If you have hotspot, I mean, the last open house I did was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I typically, and I don't do a lot of real estate anymore. I kind of phased out of it because it's so busy managing the company. I just don't have time for it. You guys are my customers. I have time for you guys and to be here for you and your questions and concerns and issues. And that's about it. So occasionally I get friends and family that are like, hey, you want to list this very expensive house, and I'll do that. But if it's a small house, I just refer it off. I don't have the time to do it. But the last open house I brought my computer, it got hotspot. I did a bunch of work for those 3 hours while I was in there, and maybe one party came through. A lot of times you get neighbors, looky-loos, that come through and they're like, oh yeah, I want to see what the neighbor's house looks like so I can compare it to my house. So if they're like, ooh, the neighbor's house, they didn't do any work. I did a bunch of work to mine. They're selling it for an exorbitant price. My house should be worth more than that. Well, maybe last year. The question is, will the house sell for a high price? If the house won't sell for a high price, then the neighbor's house isn't worth a high price either. Okay, so open houses are a thing. I don't want to talk you out of them. I just want to make sure you communicate with your seller on why you're doing them. And if they're adamant, you have to read the room. Okay, so if they're adamant that God, open houses are something I really want, kind of pick that up, and see if one will do, if one will suffice. They might want you to do a broker's open. If you're not familiar with that, it's usually during the week where you hold an open house for just real estate brokers and agents. Usually you offer something afternoons. It could be champagne and strawberries. It could be lunch. I've seen, Subway sandwiches or Jersey Mike's, and they're chopped up, and you've got all these goodies for people to come and have lunch, a free lunch, and then walk around the house and tell you what is wrong and what is right with the house, and if they think it's priced well. So that was a thing before COVID. Again, a lot of stuff, we're still in this COVID recovery fog. So a lot of people are hesitant about strangers coming into their house. There's still just kind of a hangover from COVID. I mean, mostly we're past it, but there's still a hangover, and you have to be aware of what that hangover means when you're listing a house. So open houses, we covered that. So now it's on the market. Now it's in the MLS. So let's talk a little bit about the MLS. Once you have your pictures done, basically the photographer, or you, if you did them yourself, you're going to have to upload them onto your computer. A photographer is going to email them to you, usually through some portal. You're going to have to be careful about the MLS and the size of that picture. I don't even know why I'm doing my hands, but the size of the picture in megabits. Okay, so they might be limited to 1.5 or 2 megabits per picture. The technology won't download some of these really sophisticated cameras. You might use a really nice camera, and that's 15 megabits, but you've got to reduce the size of that picture to upload it into the listing. Okay, so you create the listing. Actually, we need to go back to that, creating the listing and doing the listing. Once you have the listing contract, and before you're doing open houses, before you're actually putting it on the MLS, you've got to do some work with the MLS. Now, you can typically have the MLS upload those pictures and upload the listing and do the whole listing for you, or you can do it yourself. If you do it yourself, you typically have to take a class. You have to be authorized to be able to upload, and I probably will have to sign off on that. So check with your MLS and see if you need to do that to get the authorization. Once you do it, if you do it yourself, it's very self-explanatory. It's like, okay, here's 10 digital pages of the address, the asking price. It might be the legal description, so you might have to type that in or upload that Exhibit A with the legal description on there. Lots of fluffy words. So you might do in public remarks, oh, glorious views and sumptuous appointments and all the other stuff that you can put in there that you've seen on real estate listings. I'm not as fluffy as that, as you guys can tell, just looking at me. So I just kind of do what I need to do. 3 bedroom, 2 bath. I will try to fluff it up a little bit, some nice adjectives and things like that. But sometimes I see people go way over the top and they talk about this glorious view, and then you get there and you're like, it's not that good a view. It's it's kind of got a few trees and you see hills in the distance, but it's not a glorious view. Seattle, West Seattle, overlooking the Sound and the Olympic Mountains, that is a glorious view, unobstructed. Salt Lake City, up on the mountain in Sandy, looking at the mountains. I mean, that's a glorious view, in the whole city and the valley. So there are views, and then there are views. And so be really careful. Try not to embellish too much, but you want to upsell a little bit. So you're going to type all that in, and it takes me roughly about, I'd say, an hour, hour and a half to do it. You upload the pictures, and again, the MLS will do it for you. I know some MLSs, that'll do they will do a listing for like $6, typically $10, $15, something like that. So even if you have authorization to do the listing and upload it into the MLS, why not just pay them $6? So that's one way to get your listing on there. And that usually takes them about 24 hours. They actually have people that do it, whether it's a small, teeny little MLS or it's a gigantic one like the Northwest MLS. It just depends on what resources they have. So check with your MLS on if they will upload listings for you and if they'll enter that information in. Everything from, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, composite roofing versus metal roofing, stucco siding versus plank siding, cedar siding, shake versus vinyl, all that kind of stuff. Vinyl windows versus old wooden windows, single pane, double pane, triple pane, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things in there that you just basically fill out. One of the tricks I do when I'm doing a listing is I pull up an old listing. So I go into the MLS, let's say it's 123 Oak Street. I pull up 123 Oak Street and I was like, oh, here's a listing from 5 years ago. I'm going to print that off and I'm going to copy a lot of this information, like the area and the grid and the neighborhood designation, the name. I mean, stuff that you really wouldn't even think about. Sometimes someone else researched it and you just have to copy it. Don't copy what they write because they will bust you for it. Remember that old person that listed it, they want this listing, you got it. So if you copy verbatim what they wrote down on there, they might force you to change it. Okay, we got a chat question. Nicolette, would MLS write the description for the agents if we pay them to upload? No, Nicolette, they won't. So you're going to have to write that. And on the data input form, typically there's an agent remark and a public remark. Sorry, everyone, for the use of my hands, but if I don't do it, then I lose my Italian parts. So you basically want to write that description out. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not talking, Edgar Allan Poe. We're talking just describe the house as it is. You might have to abbreviate. So 3-bedroom, 2-bath could be 3BR/2BF. It's something like that. You can abbreviate a lot of stuff because you're going to be limited to a small area. You're going to be limited. It's like Twitter almost. You might be limited to 300 words. Not 300 words, 300 characters. I mean, it depends on the MLS and what capacity they have. So you're going to have to write something out. But yeah, just, free flow. This is your time to be an author. But you're going to have to write that in. So what they sometimes will do is they will put everything in that you have on that listing input form. And then it'll be a partial listing. It won't be ready to go yet until you finish the rest, until you type in what they want or what your seller wants. Okay. Dun dun dun. Participants. Let's mute all again. I was catching some chatter there. Okay. So that's the MLS, and you're going to be, again, it's a lot of work. Once you get the listing, I mean, it's 2 or 3 days of work and ordering the preliminary title and getting the sign ordered and going out there with a lockbox and getting the pictures taken and communicating about open houses and contacting the MLS and getting those pictures from your computer to the MLS, uploading them into the MLS. At that point, you can also upload the documents, the associated docs. So that's where you upload lead-based paint form, the seller or property disclosure, and the Exhibit A. I would do at least those 3. Sometimes people, they do a lot more. They do, in Washington, there's so many addendums. They'll do utility addendums and all sorts of stuff like that. But you're not necessarily required to do that. But I would do it. I would do your lead-based paint, your property disclosure, and your Exhibit A. Do those 3. So when people make an offer, they basically can download those forms and then they can sign them and give them to you with the offer. These are offering hands. So that when they offer to buy that house, they're going to have the purchase and sale agreement along with these forms. Okay. So it's Thursday or Friday. The pictures have been uploaded. The MLS has got this active. They might have it as a partially active or a fully active listing. So back to the question about the agent remarks, they might have it as a partial listing, but you need to fill in some of the blanks. And they'll let you do that. They'll let you have access to some of those blanks. They'll let you upload the documents, upload the photos, stuff like that. So just check with your MLS on what you can and can't do, or what you want to do, or what you don't want to do. And you want to get everything in there. But ultimately, that partial listing is in there. Everything, all the information is in there. Everything about the house is in there. The photos are in there. The associated docs are in there. And then you basically, this is a button pushing, you hit enter, and it goes live. And it goes live immediately. Now, if you're not familiar with an IDX feed is interdata exchange. So an IDX feed is basically taking all that information from the MLS and throwing it out there to the universe. Okay, so you're putting it out there on Zillow, on Realtor.com, on, you know, whether it's Century 21's website in Florida, they could probably pick it up. I mean, it depends on what kind of IDX feed connections and agreements they have. So, for example, Zillow and Realtor and Redfin, they've got IDX exchange agreements with every MLS in America. That's why when you go search on Zillow, you could be searching in Birmingham, Alabama, and then go, oh, let's just go up here to Rochester, New York, and still search up there. So you can search all over the country. What it takes to do that it's an army of IT specialists that integrate these thousands of IDX feed agreements to make it a seamless search. Zillow has spent tens of millions of dollars perfecting and improving and constantly maintaining that search engine. Okay, so it's not easy to do. It's not like you just kind of go, oh yeah, you know what, I'm just going to get an IDX feed agreement with the MLS, and now you can search anywhere in the country. To make it seamless and barrierless, it takes a lot of work. And I know some of the people over there at Zillow. They've got a lot of them. Now, granted, right now they're laying a ton of people off. Redfin, EXP, they're all laying a ton of people off, and we are not. So here's to us. But it does take a lot of resources to do that search. Honestly, I don't care if people search at Zillow. I search on Zillow sometimes. I mean, why not? I try to get into the MLS because I get a little bit more detail, but it's a pretty fancy system they have, and it works just fine. So you want to make sure that your listing is showing up. So go to Realtor.com, go to Zillow, go to these other websites and zoom in on that area and make sure your listing is showing up as you want to display it. Okay, so check that. Some other things you're going to check is again, we talked about the assessor's website. You're gonna check the taxes and the assessed value and things like that. So you always want to pull assessed value, Zillow comps, your own. Actually, we'll go into that. Let me check. I think we can finish up on uploading the listing. Let's get into how do you comp it out and how are you looking at other properties in that area that have sold to get the right price. This is kind of a big section for us, so I wanted to keep it as one section. Let me check the chat room. No questions. Okay. So how do we get to the price that we want to get to with the seller? I need to take a little bit of a break. You guys take a break. Take a sip of whatever you're drinking. Griselda, no booze. That's for after this call. Atta girl, hydrate. Hydration is key, especially up here in the Northwest. It is just beautiful, beautiful weather right now. Okay, how do we price a house? So you hear these acronyms, stretching my legs. These acronyms, CMA, comparative market analysis. I do kind of a hybrid comparative market analysis. There's different, each of your MLSs has a CMA section where you can kind of, figure out and compare like properties, but there are no exact like properties out there. There really aren't there's no perfect property unless you're in like a PUD or some development where they're cookie cutter, they're all exactly the same square footage, they look the same. Then you might have this perfect comp. 2 doors down, sold for $600,000 3 weeks ago. Guess what? Your property is worth $600,000. But to really get to get an accurate price of these houses, to do a proper CMA, you're going to have to do a bunch of things. Because here's what's going to happen, especially right now. So this is a really important piece of what I'm talking about. Your seller wants more money than their house is worth. That's just how it is. They want as much money as possible, and that's human nature. So do you guys. If you're selling one of your houses, you're going to want as much money as possible as you can get out of it. The fact that the market is changing and is becoming kind of, how do I put this? It's changing into a very slight downward trajectory, very slight. Depends on the market you're in. Spokane, Boise, Coeur d'Alene, they were super overheated the last few years. They're going to come down more. Birmingham, Alabama, you guys were not super overheated, so you're not going to come down quite as much. Seattle, you were overheated, but your wages kept up with that really high, those high prices. So Seattle's probably not going to come down that much as well. So it really depends on the economy in that specific area. But overall, things are going to be coming down a little bit. So the seller wants a ton of money. And they see the appreciation. They know their house is worth more than it probably should be. But they're going to be looking at the neighbor down the street that 6 months ago sold for $600,000. Well, guess what? The market has changed dramatically from 6 months ago to today. So even though an appraiser goes back 6 months, I wouldn't go back more than 3 months. I would be like, okay, let's see what has sold the last 3 months. Now, here's some of the components that you're going to look for. And this is what appraisers look for. So when they're appraising a property, they look for the date, when the property was built. So if it's 1945, they'll go back to 1940 up to 1950, roughly a 10-year swing. 5 year swing this way, 5 year swing on that way. It does kind of depend on the time. If it was 1970, 1965 was pretty different. A lot of new materials were coming on in the 70s, and they were better materials in the 60s, but a lot of modern materials. It was the first generation of a lot of modern materials in the 70s, and they were crappy. They were awful in the 80s as well. Today we've got good materials. So think of, stone veneers. Think of some hardy board cement siding. Think of some of the composite roofing you have out there now. So the vinyl windows you have today. So today's products are really, really good, but it took 20 or 30 or 40 years to get there, to get to today's products. So go back 5 years, go ahead 5 years when you're doing this, when you're looking at the date range for a house. Again, if it was built in 1958, go down to 1953, go up to 1962. You can expand. I mean, this is not an exact science. It's a little bit of science and a little bit of art. So just remember that. And then you want to go back, you can go back 6 months for sales. And we're talking about properties that have sold. Okay, they've closed. Now, I consider pending properties as well. So if there's a pending property, I might get on the phone and call the listing agent and say, hey, I'm trying to comp out a house in the neighborhood. Can you tell me what the final price on that property you're selling is? 95% of the time they'll say yes. 5% of the time they'll say no and hang up. I mean, that's just the human nature right there. But you want to figure out how old it is. Like properties, go back 3 months. Now, again, you can go back 6 months, but go back 3 months if you can. Go out 1 mile. So if your subject property is, pin it in the MLS, and then usually it's a circle type thing that expands out a mile. If you're in a city, a mile is good enough. If you're in the country, you might have to go 3 miles. You might have to go 4 miles. So if you've got, acreage, there's 10-acre parcels, you're way out in the country, heck, you might have to go out, you go out 10 miles. But always start with 1 mile because appraisers do it that way. And the reason I do it this way, I do it like an appraiser, is because ultimately if a buyer comes along and they're financing the property, you want to make sure that it's going to appraise for that price. Okay? So it's really important. Bedrooms and bathrooms. You can usually stay with the bathroom, so you can put in 2 bathrooms or 3 bathrooms, whatever your subject property is. Bedrooms, you can go up 1 or down. Or that came out wrong again. You can go up 1 or down 1. So it just depends on the property itself. If your subject property is a 3-bed, 2-bath house, and you see some house that's 5 bedrooms and 2 baths, so they took a basement and they kind of cut out some windows and they made some bedrooms out of it, that's okay. The bathrooms are more important. Fireplace, style. Is it a split level from 1965, kind of a Brady Bunch house? Or you can't compare that to a colonial brick house. That's not going to work style-wise. So you have to be really careful about what it looks like, what the neighborhood is in. So even if you're within a mile, if that mile's got beautiful houses up on the hill and then down the hill that's kind of less desirable, it's hard to pull a comp from that less desirable neighborhood. So you have to adjust and you have to give and take a little bit. So that's the art piece of doing a CMA, again, a comparative market analysis. That part of the equation is just, there's no exact way to get there. So you do all this stuff, and then you've got some pending properties, you got some sold properties, they're within 3 months, you got one that sold 4 months ago, okay. It might have sold in an appreciating market. I would say, well, you've got this one from 6 months ago that's exactly like the subject property. It sold for 600,000, but things have been appreciating. Subject property is probably worth 620. So it just depends on the market, what it's doing, and all that good stuff. If you have questions about CMA, contact Matt and Kendra, contact me. Just say, did I do this right, or is this the right value? But I'll tell you what ultimately the right value is. It's going to be what your client wants. So what I do is I take all this information. I got tons of information. I compare taxes as well. So I talked about taxes earlier. I go to the assessor's website. I go, I got these 3 comps over here. Their taxes, annual taxes are $2,500, $2,400, $2,600, and my subject property's comparable taxes are $1,200 a year. Why does the county assessor? Remember, the county assessor is a licensed appraiser typically. Why does that person think that my subject property is worth half as much as these other comps that I'm finding? Curious question. Red flags. So you gotta kind of understand what the county assessor is assessing the property at compared to the comps that you're finding on the MLS. So again, a lot of factors involved. The final factor, I go to Zillow and I go, okay, what's their Zestimate? And the only reason I do that is because people search that way. So if they're searching that way, you get it on the market and you've got it for 600 and the Zestimate is 400. Well, buyers are going to be like, wait a second, why is it worth so much? And you're going to have to justify that. Could because it's up on the hill. It's got this beautiful view of the Puget Sound, or this beautiful view. You're a block from the beach in Miami, and so you've got these really nice features of that property that the comps don't have. So you have to take that into account too. But ultimately, you take those comps and you give them to the seller. And you say, hey, seller, what do you want for this? And then listen. It's sales. If you're a good salesperson, you're going to listen. You're going to listen. You get them talking. You get them rolling. Well, I want this and I want that. I think it's worth 625. And I know we bought it for 400 last year, but I think it's worth 625. Okay, there's the first big red flag. Keep listening. And then eventually you're going to introduce this information. This information that you've brought to them is to kind of pull them back down to reality. I think I was doing pulling a rope here. You're pulling them back to reality. You're trying to get them reasonable. You want them to be reasonable enough to say, okay, well, 600 probably is not. It's not the right price. I understand the market's changing, and I'll look at these comps and let me think about it. You're going to get some of that stuff. You want to pull them back to reality the best you can. Because sometimes, and there's some agents out there like, oh yeah, I'll list your property for $2 million. But they know in their mind it's worth 600. And they're only doing that to get the listing. This is unethical, by the way, for all you realtors out there. This violates the code of ethics because effectively you're deceiving them into thinking they can get more for a property with the very well known tactic of beating them down over time so they get to a price that you know is going to sell the house. So the point is, be honest with them, be as honest as you can, brutally honest sometimes, and just say, God, I know you want 600,000 for this house. All these comps are saying 450. So if we go 460, I think we're pushing it a little bit, but we can do that. But then you have a plan. Let me check questions, make sure, no questions. So then you have a plan. And here's the plan that I do, and you guys can adjust this however you want, but I say, okay, we're going to push the top end of the market, and then every 2 weeks, let's come down $10,000 or $5,000 or $7,412, whatever you guys decide. So you're coming down in price, okay? And do it every week or 2 weeks. So we say, okay, we're going to let the market dictate what that price is. And if we go on the high side of the ballpark, we're within the ballpark. So if we go on the high side, we might have to bring it down a little bit incrementally. So let's have a 6 week or 8 week plan to come down every 2 weeks, $10,000. Is that agreeable? They might say, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Like I want 600 period. These are the red flags that are going to be going off in your mind. Like, oh, I don't know if I can get this. I mean, the market's changing. Obviously, we don't want to walk away from business. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you literally are like, this house is worth 400 and you want $1 million for it. Like, that's not going to happen. And you got to get a feel for the seller. Feel like, how emotional are they? How reasonable are they? Can I talk to them? Can I just be fair and honest and talk to them? And will they accept the truth? Obviously, a lot of us right now are not accepting a lot of truths. So, throw out things like misinformation and stuff like that. The comps are not misinformation. So that's really hard for them to say, well, it's worth 1.2 million and your comps are saying 450,000. A reasonable person's going to come to the conclusion that they've got to price it down. You can bring them some articles. So I would bring them articles. Most of the people, again, the real estate I do is all referrals. So they come to me and I'm not marketing myself, but I have in the past. When I got started in the industry, I used to have to market myself all the time. And it was a slog sometimes. I mean, I would walk neighborhoods, I would knock on doors, I would do whatever it took to get people's ear so that then I could get their business later. Again, if you listen to someone's story, that's half the battle right there. They trust you now. Then you can get the real estate business after you've listened to their story. So it's just finding someone that's willing to tell you their story and basically develop a relationship. It's a small business relationship, but it is a relationship. So dealing with them and asking them what they want for the property is a really important piece. And then everything will flow from there. Does that make sense? So it'll flow, whether it's good, whether it's bad, you don't know yet. And then you're just going to have to kind of figure it out and what the market will dictate. The market is the market. In my 30 years of doing this, and I've managed now 60,000 transactions, the market is always right. It will dictate what that property is worth. They might think that, okay, down the street, a house sold for $600,000 and they want 600 for theirs. Well, guess what? That house has brand new windows, brand new roof, beautiful landscape, and they take care of the yard. And our subject property, neglect, they never did anything. The roof is falling apart. The windows are cracked. They're single pane windows from whenever. Our property is not as good as that property that sold down the street. So there's no way we're going to get 600, especially in a depreciating market. So we have to be very careful. We have to figure out how we tiptoe around the seller's desires to get them to a reasonable, scientifically fact-based truth with the CMA that we're bringing. And don't be afraid to print out. I print out the assessor's website, on that property. I print out the Zillow's estimate on that property. I put all my comps into one side of a folder. I bring those folders. If you guys ever need folders, we've got thousands of Modus folders around here. I think we've got probably hundreds of Kelly Wright folders, but you can buy them on the store. But if you want the Modus ones, we just give them away. But if folder with your card in there and talking about all this information that's supposed to get them to a reasonable price. And then ultimately you just have to decide, okay, do I want to list this property? So I think it's worth 450. They want 600. Do I want to go with it and see what happens? I think most of you will probably say yes. I would say yes. And then just as long as I gave them all the information and they basically said, okay, I don't care what about the information you're giving me. I want to list it for this. And if you're just honest with them and say, look, it's probably not going to sell for that price. We could try it, but you're going to have to come down in price. Would you be agreeable to that if it doesn't sell at the price you want? And they say yes, then I would continue with it. So you guys will have to decide. This is, and again, it could be a total stranger. It could be a relative where you can talk to them honestly and say, look, this property is super ugly. The orange shag carpet, that's not working anymore. Unless it's retro and coming back, then maybe it is. But the stuff that they think is really nice probably isn't nice to the marketplace. And you're just going to have those conversations. Okay, any questions on pricing a house and CMAs and stuff like that? Again, there's so much stuff that I know I'm missing. We would be here all day, and I'm trying to keep this. We're an hour in. I'm going to try to keep this to like an hour and a half. We're all busy, so I don't want to take all day. I could literally do this all day long. I'd probably keel over exhausted, but I could talk about working with sellers, CMAs, pricing a house, all that stuff forever. There's so many factors involved. So you guys, if you have questions, feel free to fire away. Let's see. Now I need water. So we've covered the components of the listing itself. We've covered the CMA and the pricing. We've covered the MLS and what you do to upload it. We've covered open houses. We've covered a lot of that. And I'll tell you, let me finish on this one. Oh, there is Griselda. Thank you, Joe. See you on the 12th, Lake Oswego. Yes.
Lake I'll see you then. I look forward to it. Thank
Absolutely.
You so much for all the information.
Of course. That's what I'm here for. And another thing, what Griselda's saying is we are here to help you guys. I can't help you if I don't know what's going on out there. If you've got a listing or a potential listing and you're like, I don't know what to do, and you don't reach out to me, I can't help you. So please feel free to reach out to me. This is my favorite part of the job. Look at this stuff. IRS forms, not my favorite part of the job. Oh, look at this one. Here's a nastygram. Let's see if I can do that. There's a nastygram on paperwork. So this is it's a letter I had to write to another broker on behalf of one of our brokers. It's really kind of nasty. And then he did something terribly unethical. And so I'm calling him out on it and stuff like that. But it becomes argumentative. And oh, here's one. Insurance. So E&O insurance, super expensive. So you guys have a pretty good deal here. I deal with that stuff all day long. My favorite part of the job is helping you guys with scenarios. If you have scenarios, absolutely love it. I've done this so long that that sometimes I forget that I'm an expertise. I've got an expertise in this, and I'm an expert at it. And if you send me a scenario or a situation, I usually can get through it pretty quickly. I've usually seen it. Not to say I know everything, but I've seen it before. And so that's really important that you let me know if there's a situation or you're going into a listing or you're not sure about the paperwork or what to provide or how to do the CMA. We'll take care of it. We'll answer those questions. I have no problem doing one-on-ones. Okay, so ultimately, here's probably the biggest component. Adjust my glasses, make sure everything is perfectly straight and normal. Here's probably the biggest issue that you're going to find with working with sellers. And that's emotion. You're going to have a lot of emotion. It's unfortunately right now we're in a changing marketplace and sellers are the last people to get it. Like I get it. You guys get it. Wall Street gets it. Buyers get it. The banks get it, loan officers get it, appraisers get it, everybody gets it. The market is changing dramatically, and the last people to get it are sellers because they get delusional. This is some sort of mental thing. They get delusional about how valuable their house is. They get blinded by the money. So they're thinking like, oh my gosh, I can get this much money and I'm going to spend it. I'm going to go to Tahiti. I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to buy a motorcycle. I'm going to make so much money on this house. I'm going to do all these things. They're not thinking straight that your house probably isn't worth as much as you think it is. And they can get angry. They can get sad. They can cry. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients I've dealt with crying or screaming or all sorts of emotions. In the next 15 months through 2023, you're going to have to deal with sellers who are emotional. Now, some people are good at emotions. Some people are bad. Some people are like, yep, I'm bummed that the market's going down, but I also realize I bought the house for $300,000, and instead of selling it for $600,000, I'm going to sell it for $500,000. That's okay, because these last 4 or 5 years, it could have been just stagnant. You know, they could have bought it for $300,000 and it's worth $300,000. Well, guess what? That's what the market dictates, and if the market showed that, they would be happy with that. So they get unrealistically delusional about the money that they're going to make on these properties. And we're seeing it all over the place right now. Price adjustments down, 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 down. We are seeing that left and right. Every MLS, I don't care what MLS you're a part of. I look at the information every week, and the listings that are having price changes down are they're as bad as they were in 2020, March of 2020 almost. It's crazy. The other emotion, well, let me just finish on that. So you're gonna have to manage their emotion. And I think like a counselor, real estate agents do a lot of stuff. Counseling is one of them. And the best way to be a good counselor to your clients is to listen. Listen to them, understand their needs and wants and fears and all that. Figure out what their goals are and ask them these things. You know, what are your goals? What do you want to do if we sell this house? You know, what are you going to do with it? Oh, you know, if it's frivolous, if like I am going to buy a motorcycle and move to Tahiti and, you know, live on the beach or whatever, it's like, well, you know, but if it's like, look, my son's going to college in a couple months and I want to pay for college up front. We're going to downsize our house. I only have a limited amount of time. This is my goal is to get it done in 2 months. Aha. Now we've got a goal set. Now we know that 2 months is the mark. So we can't list it way up high and just keep coming down every 2 weeks. We need to be reasonable about what they're going to sell it for. Nicolette, how to help the sellers arrange a place to stay during a showing? Ah, good question. A potential seller of mine doesn't want to spend money to stay somewhere else during the showing. Ah, good one. Okay, so that's an emotional thing right there. So Nicolette, they now during a showing, they should have something they can do. I mean, it could be grocery store, go out to dinner, go for a walk in the park, just walk around the block, you know, go read a book at the library. There's so many things they can do. So this tells me if they're unsure about what to do, sounds a little bit unreasonable. Again, I was just talking about emotion. It shouldn't hurt to just come up with these suggestions. You know, this would be a good time to do some grocery shopping. You know, run errands, dry cleaning, or, you know, getting your car washed or something like that. Or just have a plan for, okay, you've got a dog, so let's go for a walk in the park with the dog. Let's walk around the block. Let's take our daily walk. Instead of at 6 p.m., let's do it at 4 p.m. because that's when that's when the buyers want to come in and look at the house. It's very important right now, very important that buyers be able to get in the house. Sellers, again, this is the emotional part where they go, well, the last few years I could dictate whatever time I wanted and it didn't matter. Now they have to be flexible. Sellers have to be flexible. They have to go, oh, you know what? I'm so happy a buyer's coming. I'll go to the park for 2 hours, you know, or something like that. They could also leave instructions where you could leave instructions to the buyer's agent and say, can you text me when you're finished showing the property? And then if they do that, then you can text your client or call your client, say, yep, they just left, go on back home.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Joe, you're saying it's okay for the seller still live in the house that they're selling, but just be flexible and they
can come back like the end of the day, or
That's
while
right.
it's not?
Yeah, they can leave for 30 minutes.
Okay, well, it will be a little bit difficult to keep the house like showing condition all day. Like they may still use a bathroom and a kitchen and bedroom.
Yeah, they have to do what my wife gets on me for. It's like, look, after you use the towel, fold it back up, hang it nice and neat on the rack, keep the toilet clean. If there's whiskers in the sink, wash that in the morning. I mean, they're gonna have to do the things that we all want to do for our house every day, cleaning wise. So maybe dust it once a week, always put dishes in the dishwasher. And if you don't have a dishwasher, clean them and put them in the rack. They've got to get into better habits of keeping the house presentable at all times. Wake up in the morning, make your bed. So if you have bad habits and you don't make your bed and you don't wash the dishes and you just leave your towels in the bathroom on the bathroom floor, those are bad habits that they're going to have to correct. Now there's a trade-off for this. If they have bad habits and they don't want to fix them, the trade-off is a lower price. They're going to get an offer that's not as good as they want. So if they want a better price for that house, they're going to have to be flexible and they're going to have to have good habits and keep it clean. But they definitely don't have to leave the house. The vast majority of houses are, someone's living there and they're trying to sell it. So they make money to then make a move. So yeah, dog walking or just going for a walk in the park or, going out for groceries for a half an hour. The average showing is like, I think I remember it was 35 minutes, something like that. So, I mean, I've had sellers come back when I've shown houses. I've had them just come and wait in the street. They went off, they got their dry cleaning, and then they just parked their car across the street and just watched for us to leave. And then once we leave, they're like, oh, thank you. And then they pull into the driveway and there they go. So they definitely do not have to leave for the night or pay for a hotel or do any of that stuff. They've just got to be flexible enough to go, oh my gosh, in 30 minutes, an out-of-town buyer wants to see our house before they catch a flight out of town. I've got to let them in. So those good habits that I have every day, the house is ready to go. It's always clean because I'm keeping it clean. And now I'm just going to run off to the grocery store and I'll be back in 35 minutes and everything should be good. So does that answer your question? I hope. Good. All right. So it's like I was saying about emotion and Nicolette, poor Nicolette, because what can happen in situations like this is the seller says no. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff out there. It's like, well, don't you want to sell your house? They're like, well, yeah, I want to sell my house, but I'm not leaving. Like it's Wheel of Fortune time at 6 o'clock. I'm not leaving. I watch that every night. It's like, good Lord. I mean, if you want to sell your house, you've got to be reasonable and you've got to be intelligent and you've got to be flexible. And if you are those things, then you'll reason things through and you'll be flexible and you'll go out and do something. We all have things we can do. I mean, I've got a list of 20 things that I could do today that I wish I had time for. I think dry cleaning might be on there, but I did wash the car yesterday, so that's not on the list. But we all have things we can do, and that seller's got things they can do. So just, again, try to keep the emotions in check. Sellers, like I say, are the last people to figure out a changing market, and they get blinded by the amount of money they're going to make. And they have to be reasonable enough to say, I'm not going to make as much as I wanted to, or as much as I would have in April. If I sold my house in April, I would have made more money. But interest rates have done this since April, and prices have stayed kind of stagnant since April. Some markets have gone up, some markets have gone down, but for the overall, we're seeing price depreciation and we're seeing market adjustments and price adjustments down. So that's primarily it on sellers. And the best way, if you get a seller who's anxious, it's just like anyone else. This is just counselor 101 type talk. If someone is anxious about what they're doing, listen to them. Just simply listen to them. Say, tell me what you're anxious about. Tell me what your goals are. I am here for you. I'm here to be an advocate for you. I'm a fiduciary of yours, which means I am going to get as much money as possible on this property. But I also have to be realistic about what the market is like. And so we might not get as much as you want, but I'll fight tooth and nail for you to get as much as I think we can. That's a fiduciary, protecting their financial interest. Okay, we're at the 2:11, so it's an hour and 11 minutes. You guys tell me, what other questions do you have on working with sellers? I might have missed something completely, but as you can see from my age, I'm probably getting early onset Alzheimer's, so that's my excuse. Questions? Okay, no questions. But you can always have questions. If you guys have a question tonight, if you're like, hey, wait a second, he said this, or what about this, or I forgot about that, email me, text me or email me. I love it. My phone is always on, it's right over my shoulder here, charging. I have a desk, a stand-up desk, if you can't see that, but that's where I usually work. I'm okay with the questions. Kendra, Stephanie, Matt, we are okay with the questions. I actually pay them. They have a salary to be there to answer your questions, but they're not going to know that you have a question if you don't ask. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. We're here for you. Don't be afraid to go out there and ask questions of sellers. Be an advocate for those sellers. Listen to those sellers. Be a fiduciary to those sellers, and ultimately your selling process will go much smoother. Okay. So that's it for today. And we have one more. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Everyone, I appreciate you. Namaste. And go in peace. All right. Goodbye, everyone.